Take a good look. This grid is your first step towards mastering melody. In our last video, we talked about melodic motion and how there are ways to connect the dots or musical tones. Melodies can only move up, down, or stay the same. In this video, we're going to translate that somewhat abstract idea into something concrete and immediately useful for making music. The concept is dead simple. Virtually all the melodies you encounter will fit into these boxes. Together, these boxes represent the most important things that can happen in melody. They represent a melody's essence or its DNA and offer insight into how a melody works. In a future video, these boxes will also explain everything you ever wanted to know about chords, but that's going to be for later. With these, you can observe, replicate, understand, interpret, build upon, and do something new with every melody ever played or sung. Using these boxes, terms that you may have heard like scale, mode, or tonality will finally all come together in a meaningful way. And you'll finally connect what you're learning with that first-hand experience of melody that I keep preaching about. Not only that, but it will elevate the way that you look at your instrument by connecting your intuition with your understanding. And the resulting musicianship will give you confidence in musical situations you would have otherwise found daunting. These boxes range from low to high and help us hone in exactly on how melodies are moving. Let's take a look at a few examples. Now, to the more experienced students out there who know a little bit about this grid, we're gonna ask you to mute your video and come back at a later time we indicate. I'm gonna sing a few popular melodies and I'm gonna point out how they actually move using this grid. Na 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 na. You'll notice that was Radiohead's Airbag. Dun, 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 dun. Where is it? Dun, dun, dun. That was Good Times by Chic, also known as the bass riff sampled by the Sugar Hill Gang for Rapper's Delight. So that silly sound was Miserlou by Dig Dale. That was Cochise by Audioslave, a super slow version. And here's one more. Na 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 na. Dun 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 dun. That was the Jaws theme by John Williams. And so you just heard some guitar riffs, a bass riff, and even an orchestral motif. And with that, you can see with just that quick sampling of some very different examples of popular melodic content, these boxes correspond to specific musical tones. Now, in our last video, we referred to those as points or dots. These boxes also define the relationships between those points. And in our last video, we hinted at lines or directions. Advanced students would be able to hear the melodies purely based on seeing where I was pointing. In terms of pure musical thinking, in other words, music theory, each box corresponds to a different musical tone with equal distances in pitch between them. Now, pitch, a quick definition, is the perceived lowness or highness of a particular musical tone. These distances are known as half steps or semitones, depending on which part of the world you're from. And when sung in order, they sound like this. These are all the different tones the boxes represent. Now, if you were looking carefully, you would see that there are 13 boxes behind me. Before any of you get overwhelmed thinking, oh no, Warren expects me to tell the difference between 13 similar tones, and I'm tone deaf. You should know that most melodies actually don't even use more than 8. And 2 of them are essentially the same, which means that we really only have 7 possible choices for most songs, and 12 possible choices for the rest. But we'll talk about that more in the next video when we look at a code breaker for melody. What I want you to see here is that every melody I just sang fit perfectly into just these boxes here. In terms of music theory or pure musical thinking, we have it all contained nice and neat. But there's more. We can harness all of that music theory and apply that directly to our instrument of choice, because these boxes are naturally linked to the guitar, or in fact, any instrument that uses half steps or semitones. This includes piano, MIDI instruments, strings, brass, the list goes on and on. So what does that link look like on the guitar? Thank you, Kevin. In terms of the guitar, each box represents a different fret. Taken all together, these boxes represent 13 notes on a guitar string. Starting from the first box over here, which we'll say represents our open E string, all the way to the other side, which we'll say represents our 12th fret of the same string. The open string here would be like box 0. And these are all the different tones I sang a minute ago. Have you put it together yet? Do you realize what this means practically for you? Once a melody's placement on the grid is known, you effectively know that melody's note placement on your instrument as well. If you know the right boxes, you can recreate the melody on your instrument. And all of this can occur in your ear before you even touch your guitar. What I find most crazy about learning music on the internet today is that tabs and most tutorials take away from you the opportunity to learn how to place notes by ear. They only give you that last part, that placement on the guitar, the technical part. I get really frustrated thinking about all of the people missing out on a first-hand experience with melody and a way to develop their ear, when all they needed was someone to tell them there are only so many notes in a melody, and you can tell the differences between them with a little bit of training. You can also verify whether I was lying to you. What if Warren was just pointing to a bunch of random boxes as he sang, and he was just messing with me? Ha! If only I possessed that kind of cunning. If you do, you'll see I was not only being truthful, but demonstrating what it looks like to place a melody in real time. Was Warren really placing that melody on the spot? Yes, I was. And it wasn't magic. Here is the real musical truth. Identifying a melody by ear is one of the greatest musical skills you can have. Because when you attain it, you never really need a tab for another melody again. If you believe this, these boxes will serve you well. It's never been easier to do so. Thank you, Kevin. You can use something like this. You can use a grid-lined Moleskine notebook if that's your thing. You can use a math notebook that has graph paper inside of it. You can even print out free grid line paper using a template on the internet. My personal favorite these days is Google Spreadsheets, where I just change the spreadsheet cells into boxes. And I just stick one of these in my back pocket. I've created a free template you can access at the end of this lesson with some examples of popular melodies already transcribed for your educational purposes. These boxes will help you make sense of virtually every melody you could ever hope to learn, play, sing, do something new with, etc. And not only that, they will immediately be applicable to your instrument of choice using half steps or semitones. Now that you've gotten a thorough intro into this grid system I've been developing for the past 9 years, there's more to the system, trust me. This was pre-YouTube days. It's time to grow your ear. In the next video, we'll learn about the most effective code breaker for melody, also known as the major scale.